Why had the U.S. military defenses failed to stop any of the 4 hijacked planes?
The FAA alerted U.S. air defense units of a possible hijacking at 8:38 Tuesday morning.
The last plane was reported to have crashed in Pennsylvania just after 10 a.m.
That's almost 2 hours, where planes were flying around the skies of the United States with no military.
Stay tuned, coming up. Conspiracy Corner, where we look at issues that mainstream TV won't talk about and won't discuss because they're afraid to bring the issue up.
Welcome back to the show. You're watching Bridgeport Now, Special Report, Conspiracy Corner. We're talking about stuff that you won't see on mainstream TV. And we keep on doing the same report. Footage that you'll never see on TV. Is the government official story a lie? That's what we want to know. Has the government lied to us? We know a lot of crazy stuff is going on these days. There's a lot of unanswered questions. One of them is building number 7. But let's stay with the unanswered questions. We're going to go through clips, and we're going to talk about them one by one. Let's see Bush. Now, when 9/11 happened, terrible terrorist attack, I had one friend who died in the building. Another one was able to walk out alive. He's still shaken up today. The loved ones of 9/11 are still asking for questions to the unanswered questions. They want answers to the unanswered questions. What I want to know, among all the questions, is why did Bush stay in the classroom when he was told there was a terrorist attack? Let's take a look.
Elementary school classroom that morning, where he sat for more than 7 minutes after being informed of the second attack.
The Secret Service has an arrangement with the FAA. They had open lines after the World Trade Center.
Tracking it by radar.
And under these circumstances, they just move. They don't say, sir, or ask politely. They came in and said, sir, we have to leave immediately. And it grabbed me and
Literally grabbed you and moved you.
Yeah.
Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans.
If people fell down on the jobs by not informing those who were in leadership positions, who had the power to do something, why were we not looking at what our protocols were there so that we could fix it going forward?
Let's play that clip again with no audio if you can.
Elementary school classroom that morning, where he sat for more than
So here you see President Bush was told. The guy right there, he's telling President Bush, look, we just had a terrorist attack. And Bush stays there sitting down. Now, there's there's Cheney saying that Vice President Cheney is saying, well, they pull us out. They tell us they pull us away and we need to get into our positions, which they didn't do because they left Bush there. And so this is what we want to know. Why was President Bush, remaining in that classroom? Look at his eyes. He looks real shaky. Now he's a tough guy, right? We're going to get you bad guys, right? And his aides are saying, why is he still sitting down? That's what we want to know. There's a lot of unanswered questions about 9/11. And this is one of the loved ones of 9/11. Whose husband was killed in the World Trade Center, and they're asking questions, but they don't get media attention. So let's look at the next clip. What we want to know, that was why did President Bush stay in the classroom after being told of the terrorist attack? That's the first one. That's what we want to know. Next thing we want to know is how can the World Trade Center come down in 10 seconds? That's 1 second per floor. How do you crush 500 tons of metal in 10 seconds? That means that every 10 stories gets crushed in 1 second. Does it really take 1 second to crush steel and metal elevators? Really 1 second into total dust like that? It's very strange and very unusual and does not make sense. Not only that, but the buildings fall onto themselves. And it's very odd. If you look at the building, it looks like there's some explosions there inside the building, on the side of the building. It looks a little strange to me. And the pieces of the World Trade Center fell into perfect little small pieces. And the way that they bring demolition down, you can take that title off, is that they cut a diagonal piece so that the building falls faster. And let's see what that is the actual remains of the World Trade Center. It has that same thing, a diagonal piece of beam, steel beam, that is, how could it be? Look at that smoothness of that. Leave that there for a second. Look at the smoothness of that beam. That's a real, authentic remain of the wreckage of the World Trade Center that's so smooth. How could something be smooth like that if it fell down and tore apart in some sort of random collapse? It doesn't make sense. Let's play that clip again, and let's hear what they have to say.
If you had dropped, say, a billiard ball from the top of the World Trade Center, 110 floors up there, it would have taken 8 to 10 seconds to hit the ground, encountering no resistance whatsoever.
The Twin Towers came down in nearly free fall speed. 200,000 tons of steel shatters and explodes outwards over 500 feet.
This means that floors shattered at an average rate of about 10 floors per second.
There is no scenario for a pancake effect of buildings falling that allows them to fall at the rate of free fall.
Now what can do that? What can move mass out of the way? Explosives. "47 huge steel columns going up the core. They're interconnected. How do you get them to fail simultaneously so the core disappears? It looks like those core columns were cut.
The way we do this is by cutting the beam at an angle.
That's one of the things. The volume is up here. These are some of the unanswered questions that never gets attention in the media. For some reason, supposedly we have one of the best media outlets in the world, the free press, leader of the free world. But for some reason, nobody's curious about these things in the mainstream media. You'll never see ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, MSNBC, Fox TV. Nobody will bring these up. They won't show these video clips that were taken away. It never aired again. Let's see another clip. Let's see what else we got. Okay, now leave that there for a second. Experts, by the way, this is a live TV show that we do here, and we put it on YouTube. And so here it says experts are urging a broader inquiry in towers fall. Well, I guess this is an attempt of the New York Times to say that something is wrong with the official story, but the way they word it, experts urging broader inquiry and towers fall. You know, it's kind of like really not direct. They really want to say that the government has lied about the way that the building fell because they said it came down by fire, but it doesn't look like the World Trade Center came down by fire. Let's see, but some media has made an attempt. Let's do that. Go back right there on the bottom right-hand corner. We're going to see 60 Minutes. Let's see what they have to say.
July 2001, according to 60 Minutes, Egyptian intelligence received a report that 20 al-Qaeda had slipped into the U.S. and 4 of them had trained on Cessnas.
Now, to the Egyptians, pilots of small planes didn't sound terribly alarming. But they passed on the message to the CIA anyway, fully expecting Washington to request more information. The request never...
Is my sound up? Okay, the request never came, he's saying. So 60 Minutes did do some investigative journalism saying that there was some funny business going on with the hijackers. They were going to school here to learn how to fly. A lot of unanswered questions. One thing that I can't understand is why it is it that there was no response in the Pentagon. When you look at, why don't we air that with the airplanes running around the country
Not
here?
a single U.S. Air Force interceptor turns a wheel until it's too late. There are no jets at all.
So there's no, that's good. That's a good image right there. there's no interceptor. There's no airplane interceptor at all. So all these planes are just flying around with no response whatsoever. And if you look at, let's go back to a prior clip on the left there with that flag. And you see how long it took.
Why had the U.S. military defenses failed to stop any of the 4 hijacked planes?
The FAA alerted U.S. air defense units of a possible hijacking at 8:38 Tuesday morning.
The last plane was reported to have crashed in Pennsylvania just after 10 a.m.
That's almost 2 hours, where planes were flying around the skies of the United States with no military response.
So this here is the NORAD control center, where you have guys there sitting behind the screens. And for nearly 2 hours, as that woman said, she's one of the 9/11 loved ones. Her husband was killed in the World Trade Center. The 9/11 families, so to say, have joined many years ago in efforts to get answers to the unanswered questions. And that's one of them right there. And so here we have a control plan. We have a radar here with 2 guys are sitting there. And as she said, for nearly 2 hours, there was no response. So what is one guy saying to the other guy? Hey, Joe, we just saw on CNN that they're saying that it's now a terrorist attack with the planes hitting the World Trade Center in New York. And the other guy's saying, well, we should send up the planes because they said there's a plane approaching the Pentagon. And the other guy says, well, I don't know about that. Why wouldn't they send airplanes? Now, as a matter of public record, Cheney did send planes, but he sent them in the wrong direction. It was like the Three Stooges. So these are unanswered questions. We're going through the clips. We'll be right back after this. We're going to air our intro here.
Stay tuned. Coming up, Conspiracy Corner, where we look at issues that mainstream TV won't talk about and won't discuss because they're afraid to bring the issue up.
That's right. So this is our Conspiracy Corner edition, and we're going to go through the clips. Let's see whatever clip we have. Now, this is one of the loved ones of 9/11 who had people killed in the World Trade Center, and they're asking for truth.
Journalist Gail Sheehy spent months with the 4 widows.
I mean, they wanted to find that more was done and was going to be done, but they kept finding that less was being done.
We printed articles, copied them.
By November, it had become the sense among most 9/11 families that an independent investigation would be necessary to do what the Justice Department and the news media seemed unwilling to do.
We felt that the country was at risk from terrorists and from incompetence, and maybe worse.
So it seems that our government is still at risk because since we don't have answers to these questions, we are at risk. I mean, how could it be? Let's take a look at that map with the planes turning around again. This is a live show.
Not a single U.S. Air Force interceptor turns a wheel until it's too late. There are no jets at all.
So there's no response on 9/11. So how could that be? Now, I got to ask you a question. The United States is the strongest country in the world, and it can defeat any country militarily. And the Pentagon is at the center of the United States military strength. So how can it be that an airplane could just fly into the Pentagon and crash into the Pentagon with no response? How could that be? Why isn't anybody answering this question? Why aren't they asking the question? I mean, am I the only one? I mean, if I was in China or Russia or Saudi Arabia, I would be in jail right now. But I'm in the United States. I'm allowed to go on TV. I choose not to show my face because there's a lot of strange people out there. And I want to raise this without, it's not about my face, it's about the topic. So it seems to be that the United States, maybe we're a very weak country. We're a lot weaker than we think. Maybe Russia could just fly an airplane and crash into the Pentagon because it seems like the Pentagon is it's not defended at all. Let's see that clip there.
Part of the problem is that most people simply don't know much about Building 7.
Building 7.
Due to the extraordinary secrecy surrounding this collapse.
And this was a 47-story skyscraper. This building fell at 5:25.
It was not hit by a plane. This building had fires on only 2 or 3 floors.
And it was brought down by what we know was a controlled demolition.
Demolitions, they look just like that. You know, a kink in the middle, and then that building just comes straight down, almost at free fall speed.
They first blow one of the central columns, so the building...
So this is building number 7. We have a nice title for this one on building number 7. As they said, this building was not hit by any airplane. This building also housed a lot of FBI investigation information. It also, during the time that Mayor Giuliani was mayor, he chose this to be the bunker. They told him after the first terrorist attack in the early 90s that it should be in Brooklyn, but he didn't want to go that far. So he put the 9/11 bunker military headquarters right next to the World Trade Center. Not very smart. Right next to the World Trade Center. So how did this building come down? Let's see this video again.
Part of the problem is that most people simply don't know much about Building 7 due to the extraordinary secrecy surrounding this collapse.
And this was a 47-story skyscraper. This building fell at 5:25.
It was not hit by a plane. This building had fires on only 2 or 3 floors.
And it was brought down by what we know was a controlled demolition.
Demolitions, they look just like that. You know, a kink in the middle, and then that building just comes straight down, almost at free fall speed.
They first blow one of the central columns, so the building...
You see, there was only a couple of fires down there on those floors. Now apparently, there, as a matter of public record, somebody said just pull it. So I don't know. I mean, I really don't know what to say here. I mean, obviously it looks like a demolition. Why are they doing demolition to buildings on 9/11? And then they said it went down by fire. Another unanswered question. Let's take a listen from some of the experts of 9/11.
Osama's older brother Salim bin Laden hired a man in Texas by the name of Jim Bath to handle all the investments in the United States for the bin Laden family. Jim Bath also happens to be a personal, almost lifelong friend and former Air National Guard pilot with George W. Bush. The connections between the Bushes and the bin Ladens become much more clear when George Herbert Walker Bush made trips to Saudi Arabia in 1998 and 2000 to meet with the bin Laden family on behalf of a company called the Carlyle Group.
So let's leave that there for a second. We're going to put the title over there, 9/11. No, we have the Bush family. Yeah, there you go. That looks beautiful. 9/11 unanswered questions. What a beautiful image. And here we go. 9/11 unanswered questions. What is the link between the Bush family and the bin Laden family? That's what we want to know. Now, when the terrorist attack happened, very terrible, horrible, America was never the same after that. After 9/11, President Bush allowed the Saudis to leave this country, get in airplanes, but he banned all Americans from getting in an airplane. So for some reason, the Saudi Arabians had preference in flying, but for some reason, Americans are second-class citizens and couldn't get in an airplane. So the government was saying, you can't fly, only Saudi Arabia citizens can, which is a little strange because most of the hijackers in 9/11 and those airplanes were from Saudi Arabia. So it's a little odd. When I first found out about that, I found it was hard to believe, bin Laden. People have to say bin Laden, but his first name was Osama bin Laden. And the Bush family and the bin Laden family they do business together. But you never see that in the media. You never know it. I know there's a lot of stuff here to really cover. It's kind of like discovering, the elephant in the room, the prince with no clothes. Let's see that video clip again. It's a lot to digest.
Osama's older brother Salim bin Laden hired a man in Texas by the name of Jim Bath to handle all the investments in the United States for the bin Laden family. Jim Bath also happens to be a personal, almost lifelong friend and former Air National Guard pilot with George W. Bush. The connections between the Bushes and the bin Ladens become much more clear when George Herbert Walker Bush made trips to Saudi Arabia in 1998 and 2000 to meet with the bin Laden family on behalf of a company called the Carlyle Group.
Stay tuned. Coming up, Conspiracy Corner, where we look at issues that mainstream TV won't talk about and won't discuss because they're afraid to bring the issue up.
You're currently watching a special report. Recently was the 9/11 anniversary. Very hard to believe. The Bush family, they should do a whole series of the Bush and the bin Laden family. We're going to take a look at so much to look at here. One of the things that is very surprising to me is the whole thing about Osama bin Laden and how he was able to go on for so long. How come they didn't catch him right away? It's just a very strange thing, I think they knew where he was. Between the United States and Israel, we could pretty much track almost anybody in the world. Let's see what they have to say about that.
The Mujahideen were backed by the Central Intelligence Agency, who hoped to give the Soviets their own costly Vietnam-type war. Rather than fund the Mujahideen directly, the CIA covertly channeled money through the Pakistani intelligence agency, the ISI. The Washington Post has published some of the definitive accounts of the conflicts.
They helped create bin Laden and the roots of al-Qaeda during the Russian occupation of Afghanistan, when the American CIA and the intelligence services of Pakistan and Saudi Arabia created this group of people to fight the Russians in Afghanistan.
Billions of dollars from the CIA and the Saudis were passed through the ISI to support the war.
Leave that image there for a second. Let's take a look at this concept, and you could put 9/11 unanswered questions on it. So here's the point. I should put a picture of Reagan up there and on one side and the Mujahideen, fanatical radical Muslims, on the other, and have a picture of Reagan passing them a gun, because that's exactly what he did. President Reagan, one of the most highly esteemed Republican presidents, maybe the most famous and highly esteemed, the most liked Republican presidents of all time, maybe since Lincoln. And yet, President Reagan gave endless amount of arms and weapons to radical fundamentalist Muslims in Afghanistan. At the time, he seemed to be afraid of communists, but in 1980, that was a lot different between 1959 and the Cuban Revolution. So here you have the images of Saudi Arabia giving money to Pakistan's CIA. There's a whole ring, and you see the CIA on the top, and you see Saudi Arabia on the bottom, and they're both giving money to the CIA of Pakistan. I guess it was called the ISI. And Russia is giving money to the Mujahideen. And Pakistan is giving money to the Mujahideen. So the money from the CIA, how did they give money to the Mujahideen fundamentalist Muslims where Osama bin Laden was in Afghanistan? How did the CIA give money to Osama bin Laden? Well, they gave it to them through Pakistan. and we've never ever brought up in the media, as much as I would like to see, the role that Pakistan and Saudi Arabia played in the Mujahideen and the people who attacked us. So there you see it. It's a little hard to follow, but let's run this clip again and take a look.
The Mujahideen were backed by the Central Intelligence Agency, who hoped to give the Soviets their own costly Vietnam-type war. Rather than fund the Mujahideen directly, the CIA covertly channeled money through the Pakistani intelligence agency, the ISI. The Washington Post has published some of the definitive accounts of the conflicts.
They helped create bin Laden and the roots of al-Qaeda during the Russian occupation of Afghanistan, when the American CIA and the intelligence services of Pakistan and Saudi Arabia created this group of people to fight the Russians in Afghanistan.
Billions of dollars from the CIA and the Saudis were passed through the ISI to support the war.
So there's a guy from the Washington Post, seems like a reputable journalist. I mean, Washington Post, I mean, look at everything they did. You know, bringing down Nixon, investigative reporting. And there's a guy saying that Reagan really created Osama bin Laden's, created or supported the whole radical fundamentalists over there in Afghanistan, which we just left recently, and we've been fighting for 20 years. So, and the Taliban took over after that anyway. So what's the story here? Why did we give guns and arms in 1980 to radical fundamentalist Muslims? Where was the threat? Russia wasn't invading anybody in 1980. I mean, we had the Nicaragua Revolution in 1979, but that was not Cuba. That was not a total takeover like it was in Cuba. Anyway, let's move on to our next clip and see what they have to say.
Clark will tell the story of what happened behind the scenes at the White House before, during, and after September 11th.
To the loved ones of the victims of 9/11, your government failed you. Those entrusted with protecting you failed you, and I failed you.
So there's a guy, Clark, saying that we're failed by the United States government. So not only do we have these unanswered questions, and it wasn't just that the government failed us, the government clearly lied to us. They said the World Trade Center came down by fire. It can't have. By the video that we saw, building number 7 came down by fire. That's not true. Not only did they fail us, they lied to us. Let's see the next clip.
If you had dropped, say, a billiard ball from the top of the World Trade Center, 110...
The 9/11 terrorists were not just lucky ones. They were lucky over and over again. When you have this repeated pattern of broken protocols, broken laws, broken communication, one cannot still call it luck. If at some point we don't look to hold the individuals accountable for not doing their jobs properly, then how can we ever expect for terrorists to not get lucky again?
See, that was testimony of one of the loved ones whose husband died in the World Trade Center, killed by the terrorist attack. And the government was saying, oh, we just, it was unlucky. It was an unlucky day. But the question we ask is, why were standard procedures not followed? And we have a nice title for that. Standard procedures, why were they not followed on 9/11? There's a lot of them that were not. For example, the no response in the Pentagon. You're supposed to send up a plane, a military jet, a bunch of military jets to stop people from attacking us. And why were in the World Trade Center, the firemen radio didn't work. They sent firemen back up to the World Trade Center. They were all killed. I mean, this is like amateur time. It's like Keystone Cops. There was everything. There was, how could in a country so advanced have so many things that did not follow standard procedures? And this information has not been released. Let's take a look at the next video.
Beautifully online, and he had the ability to connect the dots.
he would put a time up there and then he would back it up with mainstream media sources so you could understand why there were discrepancies in the timeline. Flight 93 crashed at 10:03, but the seismic data says 10:06. And then he'd have a link so you could see the seismic data.
The whole mystique of intelligence is that you acquire this very valuable information covertly. If the truth be told, about 80%, 80, of any of what the information that one needs is available in open source materials.
Thompson's work soon gained mainstream media exposure.
Paul Thompson's timeline is based on public documentation of what we know, what the world knows about 9/11.
James Ridgway was among the first to bring attention to Paul Thompson's timeline.
You know, it has to be almost taken more seriously than the 9/11 Commission, because, I mean, it's open. There's nothing secret here.
As I began researching, I noticed this curious phenomenon, which is that there's a lot of explosive information that has come out in the mainstream press, but it comes out buried. As a casual observer of the news, I'd never noticed any of this stuff. You might find one important bit of information in, say, a newspaper story, and another bit of information on a news show. And if you start to put all those rather obscure stories together, you end up with an almost completely different narrative. For just about any area relating to 9/11, the story is quite different if you dig deeper into the news.
So this is a guy that published a book on the timeline of 9/11, and his name is Thompson. And what he did was, he, as he said in the video, he started to take notes and said, okay, like one of the loved ones of 9/11 said, well, the official story says this happened at 10:04, but the seismic data is 10:08. The government is saying this, but this information is factual and it doesn't tie out. And so this timeline, which I've never seen any story really in the news about this, maybe once. You would think that journalists would be alarmed about it. But the information does not tie out. This is a guy who published this thing. All the information is there, but it doesn't. Things don't match. The government's not telling the truth. Let's run that clip again because it's a lot of information.
Beautifully online, and he had the ability to connect the dots.
He would put a time up there and then he would back it up with mainstream media sources so you could understand why there were discrepancies in the timeline. Flight 93 crashed at 10:03, but the seismic data says 10:06. And then he'd have a link so you could see the seismic data.
The whole mystique of intelligence is that you acquire this very valuable information covertly. If the truth be told, about 80%, 80, of any of what the information that one needs is available in open source materials.
Thompson's work soon gained mainstream media exposure.
Paul Thompson's timeline is based on public documentation of what we know, what the world knows about 9/11.
James Ridgway was among the first to bring attention to Paul Thompson's timeline.
You know, it has to be almost taken more seriously than the 9/11 Commission, because, I mean, it's open. There's nothing secret here.
As I began researching, I noticed this curious phenomenon, which is that there's a lot of explosive information that has come out in the mainstream press, but it comes out buried. As a casual observer of the news, I'd never noticed any of this stuff. You might find one important bit of information in, say, a newspaper story, and another bit of information on a news show. And if you start to put all those rather obscure stories together, you end up with an almost completely different narrative. For just about any area relating to 9/11, the story is quite different if you dig deeper into the news.
And one of the things that's really hard to realize is how come they didn't get Osama bin Laden right away, and how come many years later they suddenly were able to find him, and there was no picture of him when they found him. First of all, what proof is there that this one guy, Osama bin Laden, somehow living in a cave can orchestrate the most successful attack on the United States. I mean, the Japanese attacked us in World War II. They were very advanced and they had planes and they knew where to go. But this guy's in a cave and somehow he's able to have planes that hit the World Trade Center both. You know how hard it is to navigate a plane exactly to hit a building? I mean, there's a lot of things involved with that. So it's a 3 out of 3. They hit one tower, they hit the other tower, and somehow they hit the Pentagon. And like it's perfect coordination and no response. And yet this guy, Osama bin Laden, is somehow hanging out there and they never find him. And he actually got away. And it seems like the United States let him get away, at least on one occasion. Let's look at the footage there.
While there were 2 main escape routes, Newsweek reported that the U.S. bombed only one. Using the other route, hundreds of al-Qaeda and Taliban, including senior leaders, escaped. In the wake of the attacks, eyewitnesses told Britain's The Daily Telegraph that they were shocked that the U.S. had surrounded Tora Bora only on 3 sides. Bin Laden walked out of the Tora Bora cave complex and into Pakistan with a number of loyal followers.
Of course we're after Saddam Hussein, bin Laden. He's isolated.
In August 2005, a story broke that gave Paul Thompson a missing piece of the puzzle. In an exclusive interview with Newsweek, the CIA field commander in Tora Bora during the invasion, Gary Burnson, broke his silence. He explained that his intelligence operatives had tracked bin Laden to Tora Bora.
Mr. Bernstein feels so strongly about getting this story out and getting his book published that he actually resigned 2 years short of retirement from the CIA in order to publish his book.
At the time of this interview, he was required to speak through his attorney until the CIA cleared his book for publication.
At various points in time, they did have, to my understanding, definitive intelligence as to his general location within Tora Bora. I can't go into detail as to the actual sources of the intelligence and the collection methods because those remain classified. However, we had Osama bin Laden essentially cornered in Tora Bora, and for whatever reasons, we did not do what was necessary in order to ensure that he did not escape.
The goal has never been to get bin Laden.
You see, sometimes the military says the truth. So he says the goal was never to get Osama bin Laden. So I thought they said that Osama bin Laden was the one that did 9/11, and then when they got him, like Obama said, we got him, and everybody was happy, and they thought that the terrorism would end. So, what is the answer to this question then? Why did they let Osama bin Laden walk away? And we just saw the video right here. They let him just walk away. They had him cornered, and he was able to just walk away. You know, the reason that I air these videos twice is that it's a lot of information to gather. A lot of people, if you ask your average person about 9/11, they don't know really anything except that we were attacked and we need to, on the anniversaries, oh, where were you on 9/11? It's so sad. And, this person died, but they never ask these questions. Let's run that again because I think it's a lot of information. Why did they let Osama bin Laden leave the United States government? That's the question.
While there were 2 main escape routes, Newsweek reported that the U.S. bombed only one. Using the other route, hundreds of al-Qaeda and Taliban, including senior leaders, escaped. In the wake of the attacks, eyewitnesses told Britain's The Daily Telegraph that they were shocked that the U.S. had surrounded Tora Bora only on 3 sides. Bin Laden walked out of the Tora Bora cave complex and into Pakistan with a number of loyal followers.
Of course we're after Saddam Hussein, bin Laden. He's isolated.
In August 2005, a story broke that gave Paul Thompson a missing piece of the puzzle. In an exclusive interview with Newsweek, the CIA field commander in Tora Bora during the invasion, Gary Burnson, broke his silence. He explained that his intelligence operatives had tracked bin Laden to Tora Bora.
Mr. Bernstein feels so strongly about getting this story out and getting his book published that he actually resigned 2 years short of retirement from the CIA in order to publish his book.
At the time of this interview, he was required to speak through his attorney until the CIA cleared his book for publication.
At various points in time, they did have, to my understanding, definitive intelligence as to his general location within Tora Bora. I can't go into detail as to the actual sources of the intelligence and the collection methods because those remain classified. However, we had Osama bin Laden essentially cornered in Tora Bora, and for whatever reasons, we did not do what was necessary in order to ensure that he did not escape.
The goal has never been to get bin Laden.
So what was the goal then? And why did they let Osama bin Laden escape? And if they were after Osama bin Laden, why did Obama, when they found him and killed him, why were they so excited like that if they knew where he was and if they let him go? So what is the answer? Did they want to get Osama bin Laden, or they didn't want to get him, or what was the story? What's the real story? And where's the proof? Even the worst Nazi war criminals had their day in court in the Nuremberg trials. Why weren't the terrorists brought to trial? Why just killing somebody and saying that he's the one that did it? What is this, the Middle Ages with the Crusades? You're going to go just kill people and say that they did something? Let's see the next video.
It looks like one of those scenes of an old building being purposely dynamited and blown up.
Anybody who's ever watched a building being demolished on purpose knows that if you're going to do this, you have to get at the under-infrastructure of a building and bring it down.
The way the structure is collapsing, this was the result of something that was planned. It's not accidental that the first tower just happened to collapse and then the second tower just happened to collapse in exactly the same way. How they accomplished this, we don't know.
The building collapsed to dust. You don't find a desk. You don't find a chair. You don't find a telephone, a computer. The biggest piece of a telephone I found was half of the keypad, and it was about this big.
What happened to the concrete? The concrete was pulverized from river to river. There was dust powder 2-3 inches thick. The concrete was just pulverized.
In addition to those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
If they had detonated, they were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
I heard a second explosion.
There was a heavy-duty explosion.
Then there was some secondary explosions and then subsequent collapses.
An explosion blew and it knocked everybody over.
To me, it sounded like an explosion.
It sounded like gunfire. Bang, 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 bang. And then all of a sudden, 3 big explosions.
We heard a big explosion coming down. And then the entire top of the building just blew up.
We saw some kind of explosion.
By the force of the explosions.
Big explosion. Blew it back into the 8th floor.
Then we get to the lobby. This is a big explosion.
The lobby looked as though a bomb had exploded there.
A huge explosion now raining debris.
It's been a huge explosion.
Huge explosion that we all heard and felt.
We just witnessed some kind of follow-up explosion.
We heard a very loud blast explosion. The secondary explosion at Tower 1 camp.
That is another bomb going off. He thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building. Planted in the building.
Okay, so you've heard people say explosions. I don't know how many times. What was that, like 30 times? That they heard bombs going off at the site of the World Trade Center. And yet there was no reporting about the bombs. If there's bombs going off in the World Trade Center, that means that there were bombs planted there. And the building may have come down by that. Look, I don't know what the answer is. I'm just asking questions. And I'm presenting information to the public. I don't know how the World Trade Center came down. I don't know. Let's play that first cut, the first cut that we had in the beginning of the building coming down in 10 seconds, and take the audio down.
If you had dropped, say, a billiard ball from the top.
So here you see the building came down in 10 seconds. And so now people are saying that they heard all these explosions go off. So how could a building fall that fast? And not only is it falling fast, but it's falling symmetrically aligned perfectly, like nature doesn't fall like that. Nature doesn't fall exactly like that. Now here you see video of bombs. Looks like bombs going. Something is going on. There's something going on. Something has blown up on those floors. This is not natural. This is not a natural occurrence of a building that has a fire that falls down on one side and the other. This is a clear collapse. And this demolition expert is telling us that when they want to demolish buildings, they make that angular cut in the steel. Now, doesn't it look unnatural right there? Put the title over that. That looks very unnatural. How could you get a cut like that that's so smooth? Take the title out for a second. See how smooth? This is the wreckage of 9/11. Somebody was able to take a picture of this, and the surface of that wreckage, that piece of steel, is so flat. It's unnaturally flat. Now, if you have a fire, it tears things up in a very random way. There's nothing random about the way that steel beam looks. It looks very smooth. That doesn't happen naturally in a fire in a building. Remember, the government has said the World Trade Center came down by fire from the airplanes that were there. But it's too smooth. There's something wrong with this picture. This is one of the unanswered questions. And in that video, you heard people talking about explosions. I heard an explosion. In fact, I think one of them is Dan Rather. The other one was Peter Jennings, news reporters that were on the scene at the time. And these are eyewitnesses talking about explosions going off at the World Trade Center. Why is that important? Why is it important if they're hearing explosions? Well, if there's an explosion usually happens from some sort of bomb. I mean, there was nothing. What was flammable? They didn't have oil and gas in these office buildings. It's just a regular office building, and the plane hit the top of the World Trade Center, and there was gas there, but there's nothing that would explain explosions happening on the bottom of the building. So here you see all these people are talking about explosions, and where is the investigation and the media? I think we have a title about the media somewhere, why the media is not investigating. For some reason, explosions, yeah, that looks good. Put that back on for a second. Footage you'll never see on television. They're never going to air this on TV. That's a really nice title. And then what about the media? The media somehow is not curious about this. Never addressed on TV again after 9/11. All that footage that they had in 9/11, they never aired the footage that points to questions, unanswered questions. This is a really scary thing for a lot of you, I know, to hear about this. And I had two friends that were in the World Trade Center on that day of the terrorist attack. One was killed in the World Trade Center, and he stayed there to try to help people get out. And the other one made it out, and still to this day, he's shaken up, and he's part of a class action suit against Saudi Arabia and has requested that the United States release information. Let's listen to this clip again.
It looks like one of those scenes of an old building being purposely dynamited and blown up.
Anybody who's ever watched a building being demolished on purpose knows that if you're going to do this, you have to get at the under-infrastructure of a building and bring it down.
The way the structure is collapsing, this was the result of something that was planned. It's not accidental that the first tower just happened to collapse and then the second tower just happened to collapse in exactly the same way. How they accomplished this, we don't know.
The building collapsed to dust. You don't find a desk. You don't find a chair. You don't find a telephone, a computer. The biggest piece of a telephone I found was half of the keypad, and it was about this big.
What happened to the concrete? The concrete was pulverized from river to river. There was dust powder 2-3 inches thick. The concrete was just pulverized.
Reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
As if they had detonated. As if they were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
I heard a second explosion.
There was a heavy-duty explosion. Then there was some secondary explosions and then subsequent collapses.
An explosion blew and it knocked everybody over.
To me, it sounded like an explosion.
It sounded like gunfire. Bang, 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 bang. And then all of a sudden, 3 big explosions.
We heard a big explosion coming down. And then the entire top of the building just blew up.
We saw some kind of explosion.
By the force of the explosions.
Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor.
Then we get to the lobby. This is a big explosion.
The lobby looked as though a bomb had exploded there.
A huge explosion.
That's when I got blown. I mean, the impact of the explosion threw me to the floor, and that's when everything started happening. All of a sudden, a big impact happened again, and all the ceiling tile was falling down, the light fixtures were falling. You know, you got to go clear across the whole from 1 to 2 World Trade Center, and then all of a sudden, it happened all over again. Something else hit us to the floor. Right in the basement, you felt it. Walls were caving in, everything that was going on. I mean, I know of people that got killed in the basement. I know of people that got broken legs in the basement. People that got reconstructive surgery because the walls hit them in the face.
Now, there's a fireman that's an eyewitness telling you that explosions went off at the base of the World Trade Center. Fireman that puts his life at risk every day to protect you and me. Where's the journalists' reports and investigative reporting about explosions in the World Trade Center? Where are they? You've heard these people say it in that news report. There's so many clips, so many things to show and say. Let's show the one, that one.
In testimony before the 9/11 Commission later this week, and in a new book to be published tomorrow, Against All Enemies, Clark will tell the story of what happened behind the scenes at the White House before, during, and after September 11th.
To the loved ones of the victims of 9/11, your government failed you. Those entrusted with protecting you failed you.
The FBI continuously was changing agents who were on the investigation. I mean, when you're trying to connect the dots, you need continuity.
I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
No specific threat involving really domestic operation or involving what happened, obviously, the city's airliner and so forth.
There were no warning signs that I'm aware of.
USA Today reports that in the 2 years before the attacks on September the 11th, NORAD conducted exercises using hijacked airliners as weapons. And one target was the World Trade Center.
In confidential documents from the Philippines obtained by CNN, the plan was clear. He will board any American commercial aircraft, control its cockpit, and dive it at the CIA headquarters. Other buildings targeted the Pentagon and the World Trade Center.
Security in counterterrorism was blinking red, in the words of George Tenet, that the warnings of an imminent attack were so severe that something dramatic should have been done. It was unparalleled. Instead, our president went on a month-long vacation.
The head of Pakistani intelligence at the ISI, Mahmoud Ahmed, requested Omar Sheikh to wire $100,000 to Mohammed Atta, who was the lead hijacker.
Hijacker Mohammed Atta received wire transfers via Pakistan. The man sending the money to Atta is believed to be Ahmed Umar Saeed Sheikh.
Omar Sheikh admitted he was supported by the Pakistan government's intelligence service, the ISI.
Although we are told that 4 or 5 of the alleged hijackers were on each of the flights. If so, their names should have been on the flight manifests. But the flight manifests that have been released contain neither the names of the alleged hijackers nor any Arab names whatsoever.
So you see that there were no listing of the alleged terrorist people, even though they were known possible terrorists. You can leave that there for a second. And Also, you saw that clip that said that there was no warning. That's what President Bush said, that we had no idea that we were going to get attacked. It came out of the blue, and yet you saw all those reports of constant warnings. Next topic we'll